fiction if you continue to write it in your adulthood, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How many guys keep diaries?
Good.
Okay, you all have to start keeping diaries. There you go, good.
Even if you're going to write on your blog about your personal life, use fake names.
LIbba.
My advice is to get Maggie to write your ending and to steal Meg's diaries. It's always worked for me. Well, the first advice I would give is to read, which seems really simplistic, like, well, yeah, but you'd be amazed. I think the thing about reading is that it opens up so many possibilities for you, because you can read something like The Book Thief and go, oh, I didn't know death could be a character. It just opens you up to all the possibilities out there, and then when you read really good stuff, after you get over that I'm going to kill myself because I will never write anything this good, and eat some ice cream, I mean, your mileage may vary. But, once you get past that, then you're aware of the possibilities, and then if you read something that's really, really bad, you feel so superior, and that's good too. And the other thing I would say is just that you can write anything that you want to write, but that you have to tell the truth. And it's really weird because fiction is made up of lies, but all of those lies are designed to help you get to the truth. And so you have a framework of lies that reveals the truth. And that's the thing, is that you have to find those things that you're really sort of afraid to share with anybody. I always say it's kind of like when you're walking around and you say to somebody, it's like you feel like you've just shown your underwear and it says Thursday, but everybody knows it's Sunday and you're wearing the wrong pair. But those are the very things that kind of connect you to other human beings. And somebody who is much smarter than I am, and I wish I knew who it was, said that writing is the autobiography of humanity. So, find your autobiography of humanity.
I'm going to have you hold on to that mic, because this next question's coming
so good,
right back.
I like it.
Okay, good.
I'm going to call it Fred.
All right. With Fred in hand, let me ask you this next question. Which character in Beauty Queens do you actually most identify with?
The snake. The thing is that I always feel like when you write characters, it can be alarming sometimes that you discover the things you have in common with those characters. And so I relate to all of the characters, but actually the character I think I relate to the most is Mary Lou, Miss Nebraska. And maybe a little bit of Taylor, which is alarming to me, and maybe even a little bit of St. John, which is really alarming. Though I love his fashion sense.
Fashion sense is a good thing, right? All right, Meg. Abandon. It's a modern take on the Persephone myth. Why did you choose that myth?
Oh, well, the myth of Persephone, I actually don't like Greek myths. I know everyone keeps asking me, oh, you must love Greek mythology. No, I hate it. I hated learning them in school because all of the, if you've noticed in Greek mythology, most of the girls in it get turned into trees or animals. No. Yeah, it's really kind of sexist. But in the myth of Persephone, Persephone actually, not to give away a spoiler, because you probably all had to read it in school, so you probably already know. Persephone ends up being, queen of the underworld. And also, she is the goddess of springtime. So she's got kind of a cool story. And I kind of identified with that story when I was a kid, not because I'm the goddess of springtime or the queen of the underworld, but Persephone starts out as kind of an outsider in her story because she, her mom is a goddess and she won't let Persephone, her daughter, hang out at Olympus with all the other gods and goddesses because they are very naughty. And they're always turning girls into trees and animals. And she didn't want that to happen to Persephone, so she made her hang out by this stream with some nymphs or something. And then Persephone was all sad. She's like, oh, I don't belong anywhere. And you know what? How many people as a teenager feel like they don't belong anywhere? I felt like that because I got terrible grades in math, and my dad was a math professor, and he was like, are you my kid? What is happening? But I loved stories, and I loved writing, and I loved drawing, and I would draw in my math notebook instead of paying attention. And I would draw pictures of Persephone. So that's where I got the idea of the story, and to me it was a hopeful story because, yeah, she ends up queen of the underworld, which is awesome, but it's a hopeful story because she, ends up goddess of springtime. So so I wanted to do a modern kind of retelling of a girl that happens to, who feels like an outsider, and she has kind of no hope, and she dies, and she ends up in this crazy, dark, horrible place, but then she gets resuscitated, and she has to start over, and she has to go to this new high school where she doesn't know anyone, and kind of there's this darkness following her, and maybe he's kind of a hot guy. Yeah. Like I wish would happen to me when I was in high school, but it didn't. But there's kind of a hopefulness to it because, you shouldn't abandon hope. And, in my story, even though I did kind of get really bad grades in high school, I was able to use those drawings that I did in my math and algebra notebooks after flunking to move to New York and try to be an illustrator.
Did you guys know that Megan's a fantastic illustrator? Did you guys know that? No. Fantastic illustrator.
But you can see that didn't work out. So. But I was able to use it to find an alternative career. So there is hope for all of you who feel like outsiders. You can use it to your advantage to either be queen of the underworld or hopefully become, whatever your dream is, hang on to it and don't give up. That's kind of what the book's about.
All right, Maggie, your turn. So let me ask you, how do you think Sam is different than other werewolves in literature and pop culture?
Well, he doesn't lift weights.
So Sam is not buff? Okay.
No, he's all the pasty. Well, the thing is that I'm not much of a werewolf person myself. I mean, how many of you are Team Jacob? I know when he's not like glistening pecs, he smells like wet dog, right? I don't know,
That puts it in perspective, yeah.
I'm just really not a werewolf person at all because, they shed, they slobber, they bite, they savage the local clerk at the 7-Eleven, way back before any of us were born, the Germans invented them. And I was never a big fan of werewolf fiction because it always seemed like when these werewolves turned into guys, they always were, the kind of rivets and leather biker dudes, and I wanted Sam to just be a nice guy, like a normal nice guy, like you would walk by on the street and you're like, oh, that is a nice guy. Actually, you probably would not notice Sam on the street because he's not wearing the rivets and the leather and all of that stuff. And so, I don't know, I really wanted, when I was writing Shiver, for Grace and Sam to have equally important roles in the story and for Grace to be, in many cases, the stronger individual. And so, Sam is sometimes the more sensitive one. That's right. He writes poetry. He sings pretty songs. Everyone always asks me, so how did you decide which chapter to write from Grace's point of view or Sam's point of view? And the question really is, does anyone notice nature? It's Sam. So no, I think that's really how Sam's different from other werewolves.
And very different.
Very different.
Yeah. I'm going to actually open this up for some questions in the house. So I'm hoping that some of you have been thinking of some questions. And hi guys, how are you? Anybody want to ask? Who wants to be the first question asker? It's always the scary one.
We'll love you best.
Come on. Oh, where do we got? In the back. All right, you're gonna have to yell it so I can hear it and repeat it.
We love you.
Say that again.
Bare bones, the basic main idea comes from bare bones.
Where do the basic bare bone ideas for your books come from?
Who wants to write first? Oh, okay.
You have it.
Okay, so the thing that inspired me to write Shiver was not about werewolves. The very bare bones is because I had just finished reading The Time Traveler's Wife. How many of you guys have read that? Woo! How many of you cry at books or movies? Ha! Because I don't. But still, reading The Time Traveler's Wife for the second time, I began to bawl, and not the pretty kind of bawling where people look over on your husband's like, oh, Maggie, you're so cute when you cry. No, it was the snot-nosed kind of, Anyway, so I went through the 7 stages of grief, and after I came to acceptance the next day, I thought to myself, okay, I would like to write a book so poignant, the characters so 3D that it ruins someone's evening. So that was really the bare bones for Shiver. Before anything else, I knew I wanted to write something bittersweet that would ruin mascara.
All right.
The bare bones for my books always comes from something that actually personally happened to me, and I can't, I need to write about it. Like I said, diary, stuff that happened to me. So for instance, for Abandon, it was being an outsider in school and that, trying to fit in and not being able to, and, the idea of somebody who you know, is so sad about something or so feeling such pain, I guess, about not ever being able to fit in, and how would that person react then if, you know, she found maybe the person who also doesn't fit in. I mean, the Persephone and Hades myth, the reason it appealed to me was because Hades doesn't fit in either. I mean, he won't be allowed into Olympus because he's the god of the dead. So what if you really met somebody who was that person who your parents totally would never approve of because he's the god of the dead? I mean, that's the ultimate. Your parents are never going to like him.
It's probably a deal breaker, right?
Yeah, well, maybe you think he's hot. So, yeah, that was basically the idea. Yes, I never met that guy. What if I did? But no, I did feel like in high school that I just couldn't fit in. And it really was because everybody else was passing their classes. I wasn't.
It wasn't because I was dating the god of the dead. That was where the idea came from.
I'm totally tweeting that you did.
Shut up!
Did you know that Meg Cabot dated the Lord of the Dead? Shut
And
up!
Sam was my husband. My husband. I married
And
him.
she married him. Hot. I totally want to go to parties at your house.
With the stalactites.
Okay, we're serious. Now we're serious. The serious veil has come down.
LIbba, do you remember the question?
Did you date the Lord of the
No, but Lord of the Dance.
I dare you. I know. No, never mind.
Oh, you live on the knife's edge.
I do.
So my idea, actually, you have to blame David Levithan, because years ago he called me up and he said, I have this
He's
idea.
an editor here at Scholastic, just so you guys know.
And also the author of The Fabulous Boy Meets Boy and Realm of Possibility and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. He's pretty Will Grayson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good.
So the fabulous David called me up and said, in his David way, I have an idea for a book, and I think you should write it. Let's go have lunch. And so he said the magic word, which was lunch, because pretty much, if you want me to do something for you, just offer me food. I am that easy, people. I was like, oh, sure. So we went and had lunch, and he said, okay, here's the idea. Plane load of teen beauty queens crash on a deserted island, and scene. And I was mid-nacho, so it was ugly. It was like, and I just said, I have to see where that's going to go. So that was really, that was the start. And I had no idea that it was going to involve giant snakes and weird plants and hot pirates. Ooh, speaking of pecs, hot
Where is this going?
It's Fred. It just speaks to me. It's totally
Okay, next question. Wait a minute, let's go over. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Anyway, so that was the basic idea.
Oh, okay, really? Next question. Yes. What's your name?
Caitlin,
Hey, Caitlin.
how do you go about doing the research?
How do you go about? Caitlin wants to know how they go about doing research. We're going to start with you.
In a very disorganized and haphazard way. I actually love research, and I could spend oodles of time doing it. And so sometimes, and that's again when we're talking about writing, leaving yourself open to those possibilities. So, for instance, I love James Bond, and I've seen all the movies and read the books, and so I thought I want this to have sort of a James Bond feel. And then for some reason, that led me to Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, which is it's a political nonfiction book. And then all of a sudden I started getting these weird ideas from that. So sometimes I call it the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon of research. You read one thing that leads you to another thing that leads you to another thing that leads you to another thing. But I depend very heavily on the kindness of librarians. Librarians rock.
Yeah.
And I am fortunate enough to call them friends, and I will call them and say, can you help me? Can you, I was just doing some research for a new series, and went and sat with a friend who's a librarian and went through tons of books and databases. If you're doing historical research, then primary sources are important. If you're doing research for a crazy idea, then anything's game. And also reading the news. I know as basic as that sounds, that's That's also really important.
Wikipedia. Okay. And I know that's really bad, but then like you can go down to the bottom and they'll say this is their source, and then I always check the source because I know we're not supposed to use Wikipedia. But I do. And then I check the source, and also bloggers. Like bloggers who are into what you're writing about are awesome because they are so, I'm sorry to say this, freakishly obsessed with whatever the subject is. They have researched it so thoroughly. So when I was writing about Abandon, there are some freakishly obsessed bloggers who are just in love with the myth of Persephone and Hades, and they've done so much research, and they're like, according to this version, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh my God, thank you. And then I found out everything I needed to know. And then, you know, since I was writing about the keys, there are some freakishly obsessed bloggers. I love you guys, bloggers. I love you. Thank you for making my job so easy. Now I know everything I need to know because you guys have researched it so thoroughly and accurately. That's all.
So what we learned from Meg is she has other people do the research for her.
Why do I have to do it? Because they did it, they love it, they're accurate. I thank you. I love
I've been
you.
doing this wrong all this time. I'm like LIbba. I love research. I was a history major in college because I love research. You know that smell of old, dingy library books? That's my house. I have kind of two different ways that I do research. One is the hands-on method. I really try and do this as much as possible. For the Scorpio races, it takes place on cliffs, and so I visited cliffs in two different places in the UK. I visited them in California. I visited them in France because I was in Paris doing a book tour, and they said, guess what? You have a day to yourself to enjoy the city of Paris with your husband. Really? A whole day in Paris, France? And they said, yes, go wild. And I said, lover, pick up the phone, rent a car, we're driving to Normandy. The city of love in our rearview mirror. Because I wanted to see cliffs. I actually fractured my tailbone crawling over moss-covered, kelp-covered rocks outside the cliffs in Yorkshire. It's delightful. And so that's the one way I research, and the other way is that I do tons and tons of online research. And actually, Wikipedia is a great place to start because the sources do take you there. Exactly. Primary is a source that is actually there at the spot. That is when you break your tailbone. Secondary is when I tell you about breaking my tailbone and you just thank me on Twitter, and that's what Meg does.
You can't hurt yourself on Wikipedia.
And then the other version I do is I do loads and loads of web research. And so for forever, I was really stuck, so I was trying to find out more things about wolves. And I found this site, and it was people who tracked wolves in Minnesota. They caught wolves, they collared them, and they tracked them. They never met a wolf that they didn't like to collar and track. And then, even better, they had on their website the way that all of these wolves had died. So I spent a whole afternoon going through, and there's a surprising number of ways for wolves to die. They get shot by farmers, hit by semi-trucks. Other wolves kill them, they die from starvation, they die from exposure. And the one that stuck with me was one wolf fell into a sinkhole and drowned because it couldn't crawl out. And I thought, Yahtzee! That's all.
Okay.
I hope you live forever.
We're gonna get to signing in just a minute. I'm gonna take one last question before we
You
get
don't
to.
want to end on that?
No, that was really powerful. Did you want to?
Oh no, I was just saying.
I'm go back here. All right.
Gonna get a hurry
All right.
up.
I'm actually can bring. I can bring the microphone to you. Tell me your name. Oh, you want to hold it? Go ahead. Come over here. Tell us your name.
My name is Joseph.
Hey, Joseph. What are you eating? Okay, it's okay. Keep going.
And my question is, what did you want teens to learn when they were reading your books?
Good question. What do you want teens to learn?
That's actually an excellent question,
Great
Joseph.
question.
Thank you for rocking the
Joseph.
mic. Joseph, everybody. He'll be here nightly, tippy waitress. That's actually an excellent question. And here's what I want teens to learn from my books. Whatever they want. Because I'm not writing to explore some things, and I'm taking the journey too. And I'm writing a story. And I think that we we're a society that has always been built around story. And so it's one of those things that, like, sometimes adults will say, well, what's the message or moral of your story? And I'll say, I'm completely amoral, and I'm coming for your children. But then I'll say, well, the last adult book you read, what was the moral or message of that? And, because it's a story. It's a story. You're telling a story. And meaning, there's always meaning that comes up in stories, but the meaning is specific to the reader. And once I finish the book, I hand it off to the reader, and if that reader comes back and says, you know what, your book to me was all about broccoli, I'd be like, dude, sure. You own the book then.
Yeah, I think I always get the question, because I write books for adults and teens and middle grade people, and people always ask me, what's the difference writing for adults and what's the difference between writing for teens and middle grade? And I said, there's no difference. Because, I don't write books with a message for adults. I don't write books with a message for teens. I don't write books with a message. The writing is all the same to me. I don't use swear words in the books for fourth graders, and I do in my adult books. But really, that's the only difference. Because kids want to be entertained, just like adults, just like you said. So I really write for entertainment. But I would say that maybe the one thing that I want everyone to know when I write is that you're not alone. That I went through what you're going through when I was your age, whether I'm writing for, a heroine who's 30 or a heroine who is 9. I went through that. I felt the same things that you're feeling. Maybe it wasn't a god of the underworld who was pursuing me ever, sadly. But, it's the same no matter what age you are. So, and we've all been through it. So you're not alone. That's all.
Well, I actually imprint every page with subliminal messages that says, buy the next book. It's working, thank you. Actually, no, I really was influenced by one of the writers that I loved as a teen, Diana Wynne Jones. And every single one of her books had not a message, but a theme to it, and it was maybe intentional, maybe not, and that's what I look to do as well, and that's just to have this sense of other, that there's something else in the world that you can't understand, something bigger. As a teen, I used to always stare at the night sky and think, wow, it's just something you'll never know everything about. And that's kind of what I want to have in my books, that sense of something bigger that you can't touch.
That's pretty great. You guys are going to have a lot of opportunity to ask more questions on Facebook. It's facebook.com/thisisteen. What we want to remind you that the authors, so we're going to go into the signing right now, and I'm just going to tell you where you can find these 3 authors. By the Harry Potter kiosk over there will be Meg